Hey, welcome back to another Just 15 Minutes. So, how are you? And how is everything going out there? Well, I hope it's good. And here we are back for another Just 15 Minutes. So, what we're going to have a look at running LLMs locally, large language models. So, just to set the scene a little bit, we're not talking about running the very latest ChatGPT on your little laptop because I don't think that will work. But this is quite useful for a number of reasons, and it's sort of where a lot of, I think, for the next phase, if you like, in a lot of AI stuff, you're noticing there's a lot of local AI being bounded around, like Apple Intelligence, which isn't even there yet, is it? And I think it uses OpenAI as a backup in the back end anyway. So anyway, but there's all of that going on. Windows Copilot Plus PCs, where we've got local large language models running literally locally. So they're not going out to the internet. You don't need a browser, you don't need the internet. And especially if you're working on local data. And I think this is especially important for things like, businesses where you've got even data that isn't overly sensitive. You might not want that going out onto the internet somewhere, no matter how secure these companies say they are. Obviously, it's entirely up to you, but if you can have that locally and get a reasonable response, because let's face it, if it's running locally, it hasn't got that massive compute power that those supercomputers in the cloud have. Okay, so that's one drawback straight away, is that and that's where you've got to pick the right model, because you've got GPT 3.5 Turbo 4 for Omni Preview 1, and then you've got Claude Sonnet and all those other ones out there. In fact, we're going to have a look at some of the AI model repositories for the open sourced models anyway. Um, so anyway, the idea is that you can pick, with these local large language models, you can pick different models to fit the bill, fit what you want to do. Okay, so that's what we're going to have a look at. And there's two that I've picked today. One is LM Studio from NVIDIA, which is really cool because it's got a really simple get started process. Okay, but not to rule that out, there's also an open source project called Ollama. And by the way, Llama is one of Meta, Facebook's model range. Llama, I don't know what they're up to at the moment. We'll have a look anyway in a second. So Open Llama also allow you to run large language models locally. Again, they've got Windows apps, Apple, Linux, as well as a Docker container, which is what I've opted for because it's just so easy to spin up a Docker container and do what you want to do and then drop back down. Okay, so that's what we're going to have a look at. We're going to look at those two main categories and how you can actually get this up and running on your machine. Okay, so let's kick this off with NVIDIA's LM Studio. Okay, so I've got a link here in my browser. Do you love that? It's a lovely pink background, isn't it there? I've called it my recording studio, this one. Anyway, moving on. NVIDIA LM Studio is basically what we're wanting to run large language models. Again, they're never going to be the massive sort of like sort of Chat GPT, Omni, or anything like that. But it's surprising what you can actually run locally. And even on my computer, which it's a few years old. I think I've got a Core i7, isn't it? Yeah, it's an Intel 11th gen Intel Core i7. It was about £400 in GBP. What's that? But it's probably about 500 US dollars. Just to give you an idea. All I did is stick some extra memory because it only came with 8 gig of RAM.
So I've got a total of about 20 gig of RAM. RAM, pretty cheap, relatively easy. Well, it was on this Lenovo laptop that I've got to upgrade the RAM. Very straightforward. But anyway, the point being is I'm not running like a super duper, um, uh, sort of laptop with dedicated NVIDIA RTX hardware. In fact, I'm just using the Intel Iris. It's just the built-in GPU. So there's nothing really special on my laptop. Okay, so if you ever read down on this link here, if you want to read through, it's great. It gives you a good intro. I'll put the link in the show notes anyway. But when you get down towards the bottom somewhere, you can download LM Studio. Okay, and it uses this GPU offloading, which is really cool because that is where normally it would use a GPU to do a lot of the intense processing, like the RTX range. Okay, but if you don't have that, it can offload, and it does it in a very clever way. There's a little bit about it. I honestly don't know enough about this stuff, but I even just reading this bit was quite interesting. You know, this 4-bit quantization, a technique for reducing the size of an LLM without significantly reducing accuracy. So, you know, this bit here where it takes up each parameter takes up about half a byte of memory. Um, so it's actually really clever what it's doing to be able to give you this localized version. Okay, been able to run on a what is really just a budget range laptop in my case. Okay, so you can download LM Studio. Okay, it will take you to a screen like this one. You can run it for all the different sort of architectures. So Windows, the x86 chip, but also if you're lucky enough to have one of those new fandangled Windows ARM 64 Snapdragon chips using the ARM technology, you can use that as well. Okay, that's essentially what Apple are using as well, isn't it? The ARM sort of technology in their M series, like M1 to M3 chips, things like that. But anyway, the idea is you can pick whatever architecture, whatever system, Mac OS, Linux, and download it. Okay, so really straightforward. And then ultimately you end up with this. Everything's in dark mode. I do apologize, but anyway, but you've got this LM Studio running. Okay, now I've gone ahead and downloaded a model at the moment, which is Llama 3.2, Llama from Meta, the people who make Facebook. Okay, now what you can do to get that is you can actually go over here to Discover. Okay, and you can search for all these different models, basically. So these are models that are open source models. So ironically, OpenAI, um, most of their latest GPT models and things like that are not open source. They do actually have, if I looked in here, there is actually a version 2.5 GPT that is available, but that's obviously quite an outdated old version. So, but most of these models are open source, and there's things like the ones that seem to be really good things like Llama 3.2, 1 billion parameters, and you've got Llama 3.2 with 3 billion parameters. Now, it's the size of these things that you've got to watch out for. Okay, so Llama 3.2, 1 billion parameters, which is really quite useful. A tiny and speedy Llama model. There you go, from Meta. And you can see there it's got 1.32 gig, okay, to download. So watch your storage because you're going to chew up a fair bit of storage here. Llama 3.2 3 billion parameter, which is a large, you know, it's a slightly larger model. Okay, that one is 3.42 gigabytes. So I've just picked the small 1.32 gig size download, and I think for what I want to play with, that's fine. Mistral is another one that's very good, and apparently Mistral Nemo 2407 is actually a really useful one. Slightly larger 12 billion parameter model from Mistral, but it is 7.48 gig to download. Okay, so and you can read about the model summary, about what they do. They've all got slightly different things that they're better at, worse at, and all those sorts of things. The other one that jumps out is Phi 3.1 Mini. So this is Microsoft's latest one. Now this is what the Phi 3, I don't know exactly which model, but it is this range of AI models that's in the Copilot Windows Copilot Plus PCs, okay, where it's got the local AI running, okay. And then an interesting side note here is that I think it was from one Scott Hanselman, actually, on one of his Hansel Minutes podcasts, where he was interviewing someone from NVIDIA. And I didn't realize that GPUs are still, so CPUs for your everyday processing in your computers. Everybody sort of understands roughly what that is. GPU for all the graphics processing for games and all of those sorts of things. But then you've also got NPU, which is the neural processing units. And in a layman's terms, really, is that I didn't realize that even though GPUs are very good for processing AI models, or the data for AI models, the NPUs work on integers. So GPUs tend to work on these floating point mathematical formulas to get that absolute degree of graphics sort of rendering and all the rest of it. Whereas NPUs work on whole integers because that's how AI works. So it's quite interesting that you'd think the GPUs, they do a great job, but the NPUs are working. Again, it's a very top level view. There's lots of detail about this, I'm sure, but the NPUs work on that sort of integer model. Okay, so that's why in the Windows Copilot Plus PCs they're using something like Phi 3 or 3.1 locally for your local data on your laptops. Okay, but you can have it here, and if you notice, look, it's actually 2.39 gigs. It's not too bad. I'm not going to download it now because we don't have time, but that's where you can pick your model, and when you've picked your model, you can come into the chat here. There is a developer version as well, I'll get to in a sec, but you can drop down the model there, and once you've got all your models that you want to play with, I've only got the one Llama 3.2 at the moment. So if I select that, okay, there's a few options here. Keep modeling memory, all these other things that are going on. You might want to have a little read through of that, of course. So I'm going to load that model, and I'm just going to say, I think it's loaded, hasn't it? Yeah, there we go. I'm just going to say hello. Simple as that. There we go. And you can start getting into this. We'll not bother. We could ask some things and test it out, but you get the idea. You know what a chatbot is. But the good thing is you can switch between different models. And of course, these are all running locally on your laptop, computer, whatever, on a Mac, on Linux, or Linux. I still haven't got that. Windows, not a problem. And it all runs in this nice interface where at any stage you can go and have a look at what models you've got on your machine. You can delete them because they're going to start eating up some storage. You can go and discover, like we've said. Okay, so the other thing that you do have in LM Studio is the developer, where you can start like having like REST endpoints to test this with. So you can start to write some applications that will run locally. So instead of going out to OpenAI, I mean, even though they've got supported endpoints, they say OpenAI like, but you can design whatever type of endpoints that you want to use. But there we go. It's essentially the OpenAI. So if you're used to that, where you've got a REST API, get, post, put, delete, all those sort of things, then you can actually write, whether it's a browser application, a Blazor application, a normal app, I don't know, whatever application you want to build that can talk to these API endpoints locally. So it's not actually going out to any of the cloud-based AI sort of services out there. Okay, so that's what we've got for the NVIDIA LM Studio so far in a little bit of a rushed nutshell there. Okay, we'll just have a quick sidestep before I get to Ollama to have a look at huggingface.co. Okay, and this is probably one of or the largest repository of AI models, open source AI models. So again, you, I think I mentioned this before. If you try to search for GPT, you can there are some mini versions basically, but they're usually going to be the open source models that are available from like Meta, which is Llama. There's Mistral. There's quite a few other things, but Hugging Face, so these are the models. So when you look at LM Studio or Ollama that we're going to have a look at in a second, um, these these are where the models are getting pulled from. Okay, in most cases. So you can have a look, like I said, there's the Microsoft Phi 3, which is what they're using. There we go. Mini Instruct. So Phi 3 is the one that they're using in Windows Copilot plus PCs. There's a few versions of them for the Vision. This one's for the lightweight to look at sort of data generation and things like that. But there's quite a few versions, but they're all here on good old Hugging Face. So that's another one I'll put the link to that you can have a look and run these models. And again, you can run them locally with these tools that I'm actually going through at the moment. So that's Hugging Face as a little sidestep, just to give you an idea, because you can look down at the categories, you know, where you've got multimodal models, you know, vision-based AI, natural language processing, audio, you know, you've got all the text to speech, text to audio, vice versa. And there's a lot of stuff for tabular data as well, which is really quite cool. So you can actually drill down on the models based on those types of classifications that you might want to have a look at. Okay, so the final thing that we're going to look at is Ollama, double L in there. Okay, I'll put these links in the show notes anyway. So this, in a little way, is very similar to the LM Studio, but it is open source. There, you can go to their. They've got. Oh, sorry, that one. Yeah, they've got a GitHub repository. So you can actually. This is the application itself. And what it enables you to do, you can download again for Mac, Linux, Windows. You can play with large language models locally, just like what we've seen in LM Studio. Okay, but it just gives you another option. It's an open source project, this one. I do like it, but the other good thing is that they, if you ever look through the notes on their GitHub repository, okay, a bit further down where I was, scrolling down there, okay, you can actually run a Docker container. So if I flick to their Docker container repository, you can pull the Docker image down. You can then run it basically with this command down here, and then you can decide which version of the which model that you want to run against. Okay, now if that looks all overly complex for you, then like I said, they do have a download for the different OSs there. But the thing I like about the Docker container, if you've got Docker Desktop, which is free, you'll see loads. It's very easy to install Docker on whatever OS that you need. With those three commands, and you can do most of this through the UI as well, by the way. But I just used the just literally just my PowerShell command prompt. Okay, but again, if you want to go through the UI, you can. But you can essentially just execute those commands. There, you've got Docker pull, that gets the main image of Docker, and then you run the image, which creates a container. So when you have a look behind the scenes, so you can see I've got Ollama running. That in itself isn't the model running, and that's where it gets a little bit confusing. Ollama is the the runner, if you like, the platform. Llama is also the model from Meta, so keep that in mind. Don't get those two confused. But the idea, once you've got the container running, it is very easy to do this, which is run basically from a command line here. I'll just copy that. Llama 3. So in LM Studio, we were running Llama 3. I think it was the smaller 1 billion per, I say smaller, 1 billion parameter version. But in my command shell, I've got a posh PowerShell, by the way. But you can run, it's just running under your Mac OS command line, Linux command line, Windows command line. Okay, I'm using PowerShell. But basically, if I was to execute that command there, you can see there at the end, it's got Llama 3. That's the model ID. Again, you can have a look at those models on Hugging Face and it will go and fetch those models that you want to try. Okay, so I'm going to be trying Phi 3 later, the Microsoft one, to see, because that's being used, like I said, in Copilot plus PC. So it'll be interesting to see what that can achieve locally. And bearing in mind, none of this is going out to the internet. So if I give that a run, you can see it's running in that container, which means if I want to get rid of all of that, I could just drop the container. I can delete the image if I wanted to, but I don't have to leave things running. And the same can be said for LM Studio as well. Let me just do hello. Can you give me a chocolate? Ah, okay. Chocolate banana recipe. Banana. Okay, let's see what it does for that. I'm typing with one hand there because I think I mentioned before, I'm not clever enough to buy a microphone with a stand as yet. Anyway, I think I've spelt that wrong as well, haven't I? Can't even spell banana. Look at that. Okay, so I think it would pick up on that anyway. There we go, look. And so this chatbot technically is running locally. It's not going out to the internet. It's doing whatever it does. Now, again, because they're running locally, they don't have the web capability like you would do if you go to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude rather. But the idea is that a lot of these models, and again, you can have a look through at what each model is better or worse at doing. But the point being is these are running locally, as I mentioned. So you can then interact with these because these models are local, like in LM Studio. You can write an app that will actually utilize that. And ultimately, you can take that one step further and actually package all of that up and deploy that as a local application wherever you want it to be. So, but yeah, you can see it's going and generating through. It's not necessarily the fastest, but it's running on a relatively low spec laptop. But it's still doing a pretty reasonable job. So yeah, so definitely worth a look at Ollama. For me anyway, to run it in a container is great. But like I said, you've got a lot of other models that you can actually run and test all locally. Okay, so with that, I'm going to bid you farewell. It's a little bit longer than 15 minutes, this video, but never mind. Take care until the next one, and have a good week.